explosive.
Anyway, what you see over here is the base for a piece that I'm going to be making for a park in Newport News, Virginia. There'll be a sculpture up here, and you'll be able to walk up. You know, but then you might ask, what is normal for sculpture? I mean, you know. Actually, a shot that wouldn't be bad for you would be to get up there and shoot through these to those other things, yeah.
I now see it, yes.
Well, I keep telling you. You know how these cinematographers, videographers are? They'd rather ask a question and look for a couple minutes. Yeah, yeah. But before we're through,
He'll get it.
Richard Hunt, sculptor, born and mostly raised in Chicago. Born in 1935. Here it is, 2009. In a year, I'll be 75. We're in my studio, which is in a building that was built in 1909. So it's 100 years old now, on the north side of the city in the Lincoln Park, DePaul area. And this building was an electrical substation when it was built. It provided power for the trolley and elevated lines, and I got it in 1971 from the Chicago Transit Authority. It's been my studio ever since. I studied from the time I was a kid at the Junior School of the Art Institute, and later at the college. Decided when I was in high school I really liked sculpture, not that I was going to become a sculptor, but one thing led to another, and so that's what I've been doing for the last 55 years. I work here primarily on welded bronze, stainless steel, steel, Corten steel, brass, copper. This is a welded bronze piece. And I'm trying to decide what to title it. It's something about the Nile and Nubia. I'm in a variety of sort of aspects of finishing parts of it. Sanding, filing.
My name is Aaron Ott, and I'm the curator and director of the David Weinberg Gallery here in Chicago. Well, this is our solo show for Richard Hunt. It actually came to us. We've been involved with several sculptural artists here in the city of Chicago, and it came to our attention that Richard was getting the Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Sculpture Center. The thing about Richard is that he's constantly working. So even when we saw pieces, even as close as 2 or 3 weeks right before the show, the pieces that showed up had changes, modifications to them, and he's constantly working. We had several pieces show up the day of the opening. And this is an early piece. I think this is a 1965 piece. But people saw this bone structure meeting up with a bike. You get this sort of knottiness, this bone sort of like just the way that it's rounded and it seems more organic against something that like ends up looking like a bridge structure, or you end up having these sort of mechanical elements that again look like bike pedals or something. But they sort of are constructed in a way that is patently inorganic. I mean, they look like they've been physically manipulated. It is a wall piece, and I wanted to have a wall piece because a lot of people are familiar with there's a piece on LaSalle Street that's a big facade piece, and so some of his public sculpture is hung high. And the way that you get these shadows is another element to a lot of his work that is a little bit, on a wall piece, it's a little bit easier to control. And then again, you get this shape, echoing on the wall, and the way that it, kind of sits back in here, and you get these very geometric forms, and then this very sort of organic bird form that has shown up in a lot of his work. So this is Sea Change. This has been a really popular piece. I think most of us think of bronze as a poured element or as a molded element, but the way that he's able to bend and manipulate these things in sheets and then to make them either catch on fire. I mean, we've had people see this sort of fire reference. We've had people see a dragon head come out of it. We've seen, and it's been a very popular piece with children too.
Well, here we are on Little Street on the near northwest side of Chicago, and across the street is my studio, 101719 West Lil, and to my left is John Quill Park, park that's been here since the late 80s, and in which there's a sculpture of mine titled Eagle Columns. The sculpture commemorates the former governor of Illinois, John Peter Altgeld. He was famous in his day and infamous for, among other things, pardoning the Haymarket rioters, or some of them, which brought the anger of a lot of the establishment upon him and sort of wrecked his rising political career.
This is the story of Richard Hunt's self-discovery as an artist.
I think it's interesting to point out that there's a lot of stereotype thinking about Negroes and Negro culture. And some of this rubs off on individuals. And this may give a sort of distorted picture of their development. I really didn't have all that hard a time. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood called Inglewood. We always had flowers and a yard and a house of our own.
That's my father.
Parents wanted to give their children a cultural education. They provided me with a kind of environment and encouragement that helped me get an early start in art.
His first experiments with sculpture were made in the basement of his father's barbershop. Hunt still had to find his own way as an artist. Junkyards provided materials for his work and helped him to discover the sculptural possibilities in found objects. Public commissions provided a different kind of challenge than the small-scale work he did in his studio.
In contrast to my earlier work, a different kind of creative thought process was involved. The environment for this kind of sculpture is an important consideration. When I'm working, I have to keep in mind how it will look outside, where it will be placed permanently. When I was commissioned to make a sculpture of John Jones, I had a different problem. Jones was the first Negro elected to public office in Illinois in 1871. I didn't want to use an abstract treatment because I wanted to have the forms of the sculpture symbolize the kind of struggle he had.
One sculpture of John Jones symbolizes the struggle of his people. Commissioned by the state of Illinois, the sculpture moves through the streets of Chicago to the University of Illinois campus. Richard Hunt's self-discovery as an artist continues. His work is shown in major museums around the world. He has become one of the great American sculptors of our time.
You know, there's a lot of debate about what were proper subjects for African American artists, writers, and all to deal with. You know, and then there were others who thought they could work in any, they could be influenced by, express themselves in any way they felt like expressing themselves. You know, they did not have to choose subject matter that somebody thought was appropriate to their race, ethnicity, and sort of maybe range of imagination and ability. So from a very early age, I thought an artist was somebody who could do anything they felt like doing, and if you feel like doing or are commissioned to do a sculpture about an African American, like I was commissioned to do John Jones, along with being commissioned to do another sculpture that was displayed, shown in the movie, which was called Play. What was that about? I mean, I thought that was a more important sculpture than the John Jones sculpture for a variety of reasons. So it was an opportunity to move out of the studio, out of kind of studio and doing things that were simply, you know, the products of my imagination, to sort of extend that to something somewhat collaborative, interactive, both with other design professionals and with an environment to explore and further develop public art as an aspect of my artistic development. That was the beginning of that part of that development, you know, which obviously has gone on to take up a large part of my time in the succeeding years. You know, the difference between the late 40s, early 50s, up to the middle 50s, even the 60s, before the civil rights movement, I used to talk about being an artist, which made me part of two misunderstood and discriminated, you know, being an African American and being an artist. There's this process through my student days and through the milieu of other students and the teachers and the access to arts experiences, both doing and coming to know, exhibitions that came to the Art Institute, you know, things that were around in the city to become aware of, be a part of, seeing David Smith, Julio Gonzalez, Picasso's metal sculpture, the Russian constructivist Boccioni at the Art Institute, you know, as a teenager and all that, and being interested in that, and saying, well, you know, and of course, having the encouragement of my family, to go there and do that and participate in it. You're as good as anybody else and all that kind of stuff. So I did what I could do. Okay. The fact is that then the work was there, whether it was Arachne or some of these other pieces. People who didn't know me came from wherever they came from, like Dorothy Miller from the Museum of Modern Art, sees a piece, among a lot of other pieces that was in the American show that she was jurying, and says, "Oh, we'll buy that for the artist, for the Museum of Modern Art." I mean, I didn't have anything to do with that. I mean, I just did the work. The then curator of American art who organized the show, who I'd gotten to know because I'd won some prize in the regional show, which is why he had me in the American show, chose the work, and there it was.
When did that happen?
That was like 1956, when I was a junior at the Art Institute, in the school, yeah. Yeah, the sculpture we're going to see is on the campus of the University of Illinois, Chicago. It's a campus that was built in the 70s and has undergone expansion, renovation, and the site where my sculpture is placed was originally quite different from what you're going to see. Well, I mean, you can look through here. And as a matter of fact, since I was here last, it's grown in even more. But this used to be open and a paved entrance into the campus. A lot else has changed, by the way. This building here is the University Library, which is now called the Richard J. Daley Library. And at the time I was commissioned to do this place, it was dedicated to Carl Sandburg. So this piece takes its title from a poem of Carl Sandburg. The idea was to establish a relationship with a poem titled Slabs of the Sunburnt West. The sculpture's titled that. And it describes, the landscape formed initially by nature. Wind and water, erodes a lot of forms that you see in places that are dry. And things are like kind of outcroppings out of a desert as I see it. So anyway, now it's a manta ray in a garden. This is a catalog of an exhibition took place at the Museum of Modern Art in 1971, and it has on its cover a piece that I created in 1956, which was purchased around that time by the Museum of Modern Art. This sculpture, Arachne, was created in a studio I had in the basement of my parents' home. I developed a little studio where I made pieces such as this, which I began to exhibit locally and then regionally. And the work was seen by the then curator of the Museum of Modern Art, Dorothy Miller. She decided she wanted to buy this piece for the collection of the Museum of Modern Art. And of course, for a junior in the School of the Art Institute, that was quite an accomplishment, I would say, and of course a surprise, a very pleasant one. In 1971, when I was approached by then curator William Lieberman to have a one-man exhibition, this piece found its way to the cover of this catalog. So anyway, the skull, hero's head, skull-like, head-like, skeletal sort of form, hero's head, helmet, skull, hole blown in it. And Actually, this sort of skull cap helmet is one of a group of lamp shades that I got from the place I used to work at, the University of Chicago, zoology lab. And as a matter of fact, a couple of those lamp shades also formed the head and the bulging eyes on my Arachne sculpture. Yeah, so it's
Because it seems it's
it kind of comes around on itself.
a lot more active than a lot of things you tend to do.
A lot of contradiction trying to get resolved in the composition.
Would that be like an echo of a kind of figure in there?
Yeah,
In here, right here, that is. This or that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of a winged figure or something, and then another sort of figural element there.
Yeah, because none of this is cast.
No,
this is
all sheets of
all sheets of.
There were a lot of different sheets, and
So you got a lot of pieces to make this.
Right, and then here some I would heat and hammer around, but like say this would be a piece, and then there's another piece added to it, another piece over here, and then it would have been welded here, but then you grind and the sand was around, so it had.
So how do you, is this piece that sort of came about in process, or did you have drawing of this before you started?
No. I had some pieces that were interesting. I actually started. I started just making this curved thing at the bottom, this part, and then I decided to put this to this. There are times when I will just put things together that are around, and it is like the title suggests, that kind of improvisation.
So it is improvisation.
Yeah, the title is Sculptural Improvisation, number 3. Sculptural Improvisation, number 3.
It's such a literal description of something that you've been doing for the last 50 years. So seems like if it's a sculpture, since it's a sculptural, since he'd be sculptural interpretation number 700.
Well, actually,
what else have you been doing?
Right,
Sculptural improvisation. I guess what it makes me wonder is, what are you calling all the rest of these pieces?
It depends. Some mornings I wake up with a few more ideas, and sometimes I fall back on.
I live in the South Loop, and an old converted cold storage warehouse building, and if you don't like being in the city, you don't want to be there. There's the L line that goes out to Midway,
Right.
and it goes around that little curve around 18th Street, and the sun catches it at a certain hour, and it's just like this, glistening, dancing steel, and it's fantastic. And you see the light you can see the light coming on the Amtrak from way down, and you know it's coming.
Right.
And then you get the Chicago River, and then you get Lake Michigan, and it's like, wow.
Right. There are a couple ways we scale things up. One is just to take drawing, just for me to draw freehand on large pieces of cardboard, various of these shapes, use those as templates, cut them out of metal, and then start to assemble them, weld them together, weld something else to something else. We can scan these things in the computer, we can take coordinates and sort of sketch it and plot it out, and use that sometimes to develop patterns from which we cut out the metal.
My name is Eric Stevenson. I've been working with Richard for almost 8 years now. I do anywhere from casting the computer work to doing a lot of the finesse welding, structural welding. I'm also a sculptor myself. I have my own shop in the city and do a variety of projects of my own as well. This piece is titled We Will. It was, I'm not entirely sure of all the meaningful parts of aspects of the sculpture itself, but the fabrication aspect of it. We started off with building a variety of models, both in stainless and in bronze. But once we get up the initial maquettes, some of the larger elements then I generated on the computer using a program called Form Z, and then was able to generate the initial large-scale patterns. They have laser cut onto sheets of steel that were 8 foot by 20 foot. We top out at about 21 foot here in the shop. So we actually had to build up to a certain height. We'd chop off the top 3 or 4 feet, drop it to the floor. The bottom element we'd lay down and stick out the back of the shop, and then keep building up from there and stuff. So we had to do that several times. We ultimately wound up generating, I think, about 5 different elements, and then ultimately took them out to a secondary site. Stacked them with a series of cranes, did all the final welding, fitting, and polishing, and then we were able to take the piece overall down to downtown Chicago as a single piece, finished piece, and utilizing 2 cranes. We did a double pick initially to take it off the truck, stand it up, and then repicked it with a single pick, and then dropped it into place, bolted it down. Installation for this piece, we were actually on and off the site within 2 hours. Which is probably the slickest install I've ever been involved with.
Do you have any of those maquettes here?
Yeah, I believe the wax ones. I think there's 1 or 2 kicking around, and I definitely know that one of the stainless pieces is still outside or still out here in the shop.
I'd love to see it.
Lose track of what's actually happening.
That stuff is heavy.
That's more awkward than anything else.
Can you turn it so that it's the same shape as what was on the computer?
Yeah, so what you were seeing on the computer was the structured base here, and then this element.
And how did it go from that to the building up the other elements?
These large elements we did on the computer because we had to, have them pre-cut because of the large sheets. All the rest of the smaller parts we just would, literally lay up a 4x8 sheet of cardboard, and Richard will hand draw looking at the maquette, and then he'll do his a fresh interpretation of those shapes as opposed to any kind of direct scaling. But once he draws those out and he's happy with the pattern, then we'll lay them out on sheets here, cut them out, grind them, and then once we have the initial shapes, then Richard will come back into it and give us direction on initial forming, bending, and then we'll work the plate into that section, and then we'll start off with another piece of cardboard, and so it's one piece at a time as we work our way up through the height of the piece.
Well, we're approaching a sculpture which will be on our left as we cross Michigan Avenue, going west on Randolph Street. The sculpture's titled We Will. And in the studio, we saw a scale model, which is done at a kind of unusual scale. 1 1/2 inches equals 1 foot. The basic proportions of a large scale piece are consistent with the scale model, but allow for further exploration of the idea contained in the model in the rendering in full scale. The developers of this building decided to have this sculpture as kind of a gift to the city and an amenity for the building, and here it is.
It's great.
I'm in the process. All this stuff is tagged and numbered. I've got a curator putting, inventorying all this African stuff. So I've made over probably 30 years collection of African art objects, and they're objects of all kinds. I mean, on this table, a lot of wood things, both masks and utensils. But then I decided, since I was into metal, to collect largely metal, and in particular iron. So there are a lot of things here, a lot of staffs that you see around here, reliquary staffs called asin, mostly from Dahomey, the Fawn tribe. Other things that are Dogon and Yoruba. Nice piece with articulated jaw. Mouse divination. You put a mouse in there and it runs around, and whatever it brings out tells a story. Yoruba. Oh yeah, this is a Puna mask, a helmet mask worn over the head, and when it would be worn in a ceremony, there'd be lots of raffia and stuff hanging down over the shoulders of the person. Uva figure, two-headed, two figures. Interesting way that the two bodies are one body. Spoons. Yoruba divination plate.
Which means?
Well, you throw some seeds on there and they make a certain pattern. And I'm not a person who's practicing it, but this is used in the process of divining some particular intelligence related to somebody's problem. I've made a point of collecting a lot of things made out of metal, in particular iron. So there are a lot of staffs and all that are iron. Bells, gongs, down here. I'm looking at this Yoruba staff with a bird, with 16 other birds, a representation of a creation myth of the Yoruba. Forged iron, and I have, as you can see, a number of these.
It's a kind of animation, isn't it?
Well, yeah. But yeah, they all tell a story. They're these things that are either seated or standing, and they're holding different things. This is a ring, this one a horn, and yeah, they all have some kind of, the head came off that one.
Where did you find all these things?
Well, I mean, in some shops, art galleries that deal with primitive art, and then a lot of Africans bring things over to sell and trade. So over the years, a variety of sources. But again, one can make the kind of visual connection. I mean, they're like you know, there are any number of things of mine that are long sort of things, and of course there are a lot of bird forms or wing forms in my work. So that, but at the same time, I don't look at one of these things and say I'm going to make something like this. I mean, any more than I'd look at the branches off of a tree or see a bird flying and say I'm going to try to capture that exact thing. There's a feeling, and of course there is in all these different things, you know, theme and variation. I mean, in all these bird staffs, they are related but all different. So these two pieces are scale models of pieces that I'm working on in Brian Monahan's studio. So we will have a chance to see these pieces being created in full scale. We're going to Central Sculpture Works, studio of Brian Monahan. This model I'm holding was the beginning of the piece you see in the background. As I'd said before, the sculpture begins with something like this, and then as it develops, takes on a sort of recreated form in the full scale. You know, this is the model for this piece and that piece. And so, you know, you see the middle section. And then over here, is this top section. You know, that's from here on up.
Where is it going?
To Chicago State University, which is on the far south side of Chicago. It'll be shipped into three sections and assembled on the site. Yeah.
I have to ask you, what is it all about?
I guess to begin with, it's about making a big sculpture. Because the commission, which involves placing a piece at an entrance to a campus, the sculpture was commissioned as part of the realization of a new master plan for this campus. The idea was to make it a bigger, better campus. What it's about has changed over the going on 3 years that the project has been in progress. But it's about growing ambition, expressed in a sculptural form.